Hey folks, today I want to talk about, again, our propane system. I've done a few videos on, issues with our furnace over the past couple of months, and I need to get to the bottom of it. We've not been able to run the furnace and the water heater at the same time. And so today I'm going to talk about what techniques we can use to test the system, what tools we need to practice those techniques, and hopefully we'll finally be able to get to the bottom of this. In order to properly diagnose the issue, it's best to have a manometer. I marked out half-inch increments and marked them at 0 through 14 so that I could measure my inches water column. Drew lines across to make it easier to read up against the piping that I'm going to put on. I used half-inch ID clear vinyl tubing, and that was kind of recommended by multiple places online. I used zip ties, 6 of them, to install the piping on. Basically, you just want to have your tubing in a straight line across the gauge, and so I felt that 6 was enough. Screwed the zip ties on, and then ultimately threaded the vinyl tubing through it. Once I had the piping in place, then I installed a barbed fitting into the tube. And that barbed fitting was a 1/2 inch barb by 3/8 inch iron pipe thread. Then I used some propane tape and attached a flare fitting to the end of that so that I could connect it to my stove. The common practice to hook up a manometer like that which I just made is to connect it to the stove. Now, older stoves, you apparently can connect somehow right to where the lead-in for the burner is, but newer stoves have an additional regulator, it looks like, right here. I read that online. There it is. So what I'm going to try to do is hook my manometer to this hose coming in from the stove, and that should be before that regulator, and then that should give me the 11-inch water column. So we'll get to taking that apart after I turn off the propane outside. If you have a stove where you don't have that secondary regulator or tertiary regulator, this hose apparently can fit right onto the output of those burners. Since this is a flare fitting that I'm working with right now, no pipe thread sealant is necessary, although between the two connectors that are the iron pipe thread, those do need the thread sealant, so I've used the yellow Teflon tape. Now for the working aspect, we're going to have to fill this up with water so that this U is filled and it's up to the 0 line. It's kind of hard to see, but I do have the water line right at 0. So we'll go outside, turn on the propane, and see where we stand. So I've turned the propane back on, and we're at 12.5 inches water column, which is not unheard of for a standard system. The next thing I'm going to do is to go ahead and do a leak down test, and that just makes sure that the system can hold propane. So now I'm performing a leak test, and basically what this is doing is making sure that none of the other connections through the rest of the system are, well, leaking. So that's any of the pipe joints and flare fittings and everything. So what I did was I reduced the pressure down to 8, basically to equalize everything. And the way that I did this, because we can't just turn on a burner because we've disconnected the propane completely from the stove, is I went ahead and just switched my refrigerator over to propane, watched the water level drop in the manometer, and it actually fell below 7 or below 8, almost to 7, but I went ahead and let it rise back up. So it did equalize right at 8. It was at 8 when I turned the propane for the fridge off. So I think, as it equalized, it should be good. Now we need to wait for 15 minutes, and if that water level changes, then we've got a problem. So it's been 15 minutes, and if anything, the water level has risen above the mark that I had initially made. If anything, that's due to equalization between in front of and behind the propane regulator. So I'm not going to be too concerned about that because I have the service valve off. If, when we have the service valve on, it rises above our baseline over the course of 5 minutes, then that's a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on that valve on the tank so it's open, and we'll keep an eye on that. And if it rises above that level, we know we got a faulty regulator. I just turned on the propane tank, and yeah, my line's a little off. So look at it from an angle. No. So yeah, we're at about 12.5 inches water column with the propane tank on and no appliances on. We're going to leave it in this state for about 5 minutes, and we'll take a check then. Now 5 minutes has passed, and we're still right pretty much at the same level that we were. So I think that means we're in good shape. What happens when we turn on the furnace? Guess the blower kicked on. Wow. It's running at 6.5, or just over 6. And sinking. So I'm also going to force the hot water to come on. There it goes. And it dropped to about 4 inches. Well, that's probably part of the problem. Now we just got to figure out what's going on and where the problem exists. I thought I'd take a look at a typical regulator that you might find in a modern RV. So this is what they call a dual stage, and this first stage brings it from tank pressure on this end down to approximately 10 psi, and then it goes through the second stage, and this is what brings it to the 11 inches of water column. Some of these are adjustable, some are not. This particular one is, and if we take off this black cap, then we also take off this screw top, you'll see that we have a plate in here, and we can actually use a screwdriver or a hand and adjust that up and down, and that would allow us to make sure that we're at that 11 inches water column. This regulator looks a little bit different than the one that we reviewed. It had a blue cap on it, and there is a stop nut in here that looks like it's able to be turned. So we'll try turning that and getting our propane level to the appropriate amount. I will have to kick on some appliance, and I'm probably also going to need to be able to view the water column from outside while I'm doing this. So what I'm going to do is hook the stove up per normal and probably hook the manometer to the output of the water heater. Put the manometer in place of the water heater so I can see how things are changing. that manometer is not changing at all. So just to eliminate the variable of having that regulator on the large tank, then this dual stage, I've hooked up a standard 20-pound bottle, the one that came with our rig. Got the manometer hooked back up to the water heater, and I'm gonna turn this on and see where it sits. And that's 10.5. Okay, there, furnace just kicked on. That's closer to 11 inches. Clockwise brings it up. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that it's right at 11. With the furnace and the stove burners on, we're at 10.5. So I switch back to the big tank. Just the burners on is running at 9.5. With some basic testing, some basic tools, I was able to finally figure out that the problem is not in our RV, which I'm so happy for. I didn't really want to have to take our RV or pay for mobile repair service. I'm going to have to get on the phone with the propane supplier, and hopefully they'll be able to send somebody out and get this finally resolved, because something's going on between their tank and their line. They provided the line from the tank to my regulator. So I'll be back next week with hopefully a resolution. My name's Todd. This is the Alcohol Free RV, where we do mods, repairs, and upgrades while we have adventures along the way. See you next time.